Mohammed in California, you're on the show with Vice Rhino and Matt. How are you?
Hi, how are you, Matt? Boy?
We're doing well.
Yeah, thank you guys for the opportunity. Matt, I learned from you a lot. I look up to you and stuff. Not like, I know like you're gonna say like, oh, don't look up to me too much. Like, I just mean like I learned a lot from you. So, like, I appreciate that.
I'm glad. Thanks. How can we help?
Okay, so I was on Truth Wanted like not too long ago, and I told Dan and the other one with him, I think his name was Matthew. I told him that I'm not like convinced of Islam anymore, but I like the criteria that like you guys like say that like in terms of like knowledge, like you don't know if like a God exists or not, but in terms of like belief, like you could either believe that the theistic worldview or not. Like you only have those two options. So
okay.
Me like by default, I'm just like gonna like believe in the theistic worldview. Just like
why would you do that by default?
I just like because you were saying like there's only like two options. Either like you believe by default isn't a God until like sufficient evidence.
No. What I'm saying is here, let's drop the word belief and make this a little easier. Either you are convinced that a God exists or you are not convinced. Why would the default position be I am convinced? Because becoming convinced is the result of, or being convinced is a result of becoming convinced. So it should never be the default position to just accept something. The default position should be to say, I don't yet accept that. I need to be convinced. So then you would have to show what convinced you, right?
Yeah, like exactly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Guaranteed.
Like I don't know. Like yeah. So like in terms of religion, what's it called? Like I don't know. Like our criteria is that like I know it doesn't like fit your criteria. Like we accept like the revelation by default instead of like kind of needing I don't want to say like you need empirical evidence, but like we just believe it by default. Like we believe in the revelation instead of
you don't believe things by default though. Like an example I've used for the burden of proof in the past is if you tell me you get a dog, then like I don't by default believe that you've gotten a dog. But when you tell me you've gotten a dog, because it's such a mundane claim, I'm probably just going to accept it. But that's still not the default position. I have become convinced that you have a dog through the evidence of you having told me that you got a dog. But when it comes to the God claim, the claim is just so extremely like it's just such an extraordinary claim that the idea of just accepting it because somebody said it just doesn't like I need more than just you said there's a God, therefore I'm going to believe you by default. Like that's not the default position. So like does that make sense?
Yeah. So like honestly, like I'm a layman, I don't know that much, but for example in like epistemology, because I've heard this from like Muslims who are more educated than me, they say for example like like philosophers, they went through epistemology and like they tried to find like the best criteria of how to get to like reliable knowledge, and they say that for Muslims, like our epistemology is like it's grounded in the revelation. Like we get we get all our principles, all that from the religion itself. Like we can't
how do you know that the revelation is an accurate revelation? Like there are Christians that receive direct revelation from God if they're to be believed. There are Hindus that have had direct revelation from various Hindu gods if they're to be believed. How is a non-believer like me supposed to figure out which one of these revelations is actually the right revelation. They're all claiming to have received direct revelation from God or a God. So how am I supposed to parse it out? Like, I need more than just somebody saying they've had a revelation. Now, I understand, I know a little bit about Islam. My understanding is that the idea is that God will choose who he wants to be Muslims, and like, we don't really get a choice in the matter. So if I don't believe, that's just because Allah hasn't given me the revelation yet. I kind of understand that, but at the same time, like, if you could just try and put yourself in my shoes for a moment, how am I supposed to figure out which God is supposed to be the real God when they talk to so many different people in so many different ways?
Yeah, like I understand, like, honestly what you're saying, like, it makes sense, that the epistemology of like having like what like methods are the best to get to reliable knowledge. Like, if you use it from like kind of like a critical thinking perspective, like, it makes sense that like there's all these different claims and gods and whatnot. But
hang on, Mohammed.
Yeah.
Hang on. I'm not trying to beat up on you, and I get it. You're nervous. You're new to some of this, but we're tossing around the word epistemology left and right when I'm not even sure we're necessarily talking about the same thing. But all I was asking about was how we go about establishing the default position. So let's say, for example, there are two claims: Allah is real, Allah is not real. Only one of those two claims can be true. And should we believe either of them the instant we hear it without any other consideration? Should one of those be the default position?
I don't know, honestly. Like,
so it's a yes or no question, and I'll tell you the answer is no. And we should neither believe the claim Allah is real, nor should we believe the claim Allah is not real by default. No claim should just be accepted by default. Everything needs some sort of evidential foundation. This is why we're talking about epistemology, is how do you know what you know? Now, what is my default position on God or Allah? Well, my default position is I am not convinced that Allah is real. I'm also not convinced that Allah is not real. Both of those claims would require some convincing and some evidence. As we begin looking at things, you can then build a case for accepting that Allah is real. You can also build a case for accepting that Allah is not real. This is what Vice Rhino was doing the other day by making a case for why it is. I'm going to go ahead and kind of stretch it a bit and say it's not rational to believe in a particular God, or why he specifically does not believe in a particular God, and why he specifically believes this God does not exist. But for any given claim, the default position should not be to accept it. It should be to say, I've been presented with a claim. I will accept it when there is sufficient reason to accept it. Right?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. I didn't know, like, that's how like your position was. Yeah, that's like, honestly, that's like super logical. Sorry.
I'll just go with just logical, but cool. So here's the thing.
Logic with a cape.
This is why I objected right off the bat, because you said that you believe in Allah by default. And I think that I don't think that's what you meant. I think that what you mean is you believe, and you may not necessarily be able to express exactly what convinced you, but you became convinced at some point. And so I'm wondering what it is that did convince you, and whether you think it should convince anybody else.
So like the main reason why I called is because, so like, yeah, and like, you guys, I'm not like trying to say like, oh yeah, this is like, I want to convince you guys, like, honestly, I want you guys to like teach me, like, tell me if these reasons are convincing. So there's basically like like prophecies like claimed by this man named Muhammad, and he makes predictions about the future that like came true. And
are any of them actually specific enough to be like conclusively demonstrated to have either come true or not? Because in my experience, I don't know the Quran as well as I know the Bible, but the Bible, for instance, has a whole lot of things that people say are prophetic, and these prophecies came true. But when you actually read the prophecy, it's so vague that it just, like, anything could be spun to be a fulfillment of that prophecy. So, like, do you have an example of a specific prophecy that was fulfilled?
That'd be the best thing. If you can just let's not go down 25 rabbit holes. Just give us the absolute best example or one good example of a prophecy that Muhammad made that came true, and then we can talk about it.
Okay, perfect. So this man Muhammad, right? He made a claim that, and he was talking to he's talking to the Muslims, but like the Muslims are, like, by and large the Arabs, because, like, those were his companions at that time when he was still alive. So he said basically that there will be a race that will be dominant, or, like, over you, and basically like take over the caliphate. Like, they will be dominant over you, and those were the Turks. And he was, and this, it could be proven because, like, this wasn't written, like, after like the prophecy was fulfilled, because the hadith sciences, they have, like, I honestly, I'm not, like, a scholar in it, so I don't know it that good, but there's, like, they have criteria.
Muhammad, I got to stop you.
Sure.
I got to stop you here, because I don't think you're ready for this. And I'd like for you to call back some other time, because all we want is one prophecy, and we need to know specifically what was said, when it was said, and how we know that it came to fulfillment. I'm going to try something without being specific about any prophecy. I'm going to pretend for a second that instead of what you just said, you said Muhammad predicted 9/11 in great detail. And I'm going to assume that that's correct. Let's assume that there's a prediction that came true. What is the best explanation for how that prediction came true? Is it this is a message from God? Is it somebody has a time machine? Is it this is something that was likely to happen? Is it we made a public prediction and a lot of people were working to make it come true? How do we determine that the fact that somebody said something and it appears to come true means they had some sort of power?
Yeah, so the reason why, like, I would believe it's, like, kind of odd is because, like, it's not that likely to happen, is because the Turkish race, and, like, historically
No, you're not listening. I wasn't asking about the thing you said, because you didn't give us enough anything specific to go with. I came up with a different one. Doesn't matter what it is. The question is, somebody makes a prediction and it turns out to be right. And how do you know how they knew, or if they knew? Because it's possible for someone to make a prediction and not know that it's going to come true, but just be guessing or playing the odds. I mean, I do mentalism on stage that involves making all kinds of predictions, and I'm right almost every time. Does that mean I have special powers?
There's a podcast that I listen to where every year after New Year's, they go through, they look at psychic predictions that have been made the year before to see whether or not they came true, and then they make their own predictions. And they're pretty good at, like, picking things that are likely to like they'll make, like, 3 predictions, and one of them is, like, something that they know is likely going to happen, and they make it just vague enough that it kind of works. Prophecy is one of those things that it's easy to write things that look super specific that you can then figure out how to fulfill them later. And, like, unless it's, like, specifically using, like, dates and names and stuff like that, it's kind of hard to really say that any prophecy is fulfilled. And, like, that's kind of another thing, is that a lot of these old prophecies, they don't give names. And, like, how, if they have knowledge of the future, could they not just get something as basic as someone's name? But they don't do that, because names are very specific things. So if they give a name, then it's obvious that, like, oh, this guy did it and he didn't actually fulfill that, or, like, he fulfilled the prophecy, but he's named the wrong thing. So clearly the prophecy was wrong.
The thing I'm worried about here, Mohammed, is that you're calling in to basically say, hey, I heard some stuff from some Muslims. I don't know the specifics, but I found it compelling. And what do I do with that? And yet you don't have the ability to tell us exactly what you heard, to give us any details to evaluate it. But at the end of the day, I'm willing to say, even if there is a prediction from Muhammad that absolutely came true, we have no way of knowing what the explanation for how he was able to make that prediction. Was it lucky? Maybe. Was it from a god? Maybe. Was it from a time machine? Maybe. Was it something that people were working to make happen? Maybe. It's just, you can't go, wow, somebody said something, this happened, therefore this is the one true prophet of the Almighty God. That is not a rational path from claim to conclusion. It's just not. And so it's absolutely useless for us to sit here and keep talking about prophecy, especially if you don't have anything specific. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, like, of course that makes sense. Like what you're saying, like, I don't disagree with it. It's like the only reason it was like convincing for me is because, like, if you read his biography, and obviously, like, I know that not all historical accounts are like super accurate, but like he was like a simple man, you know, like kind of just like just how like farm people are, you know, like he wasn't like he was illiterate. He didn't have like all this knowledge. Like he wasn't an educated person, you know. I know that
I don't see the relevance.
I don't. Yeah. First of all, even assuming that's true. So first of all, you're talking about someone's life story that you can't investigate and can't verify, but it's not remotely impressive to say, oh, this is what the person was like, therefore they were the one true prophet of Allah. That's a load of crap. Because all you know, you could do this for anybody. Let's imagine that somebody else was claimed to be the one true prophet of Allah, and this person was better educated. Well, Allah saw to that. All things work according to Allah's plan. And so if you begin with this assumption that there is a God and he has a prophet, then whatever prophet other people are going to become convinced of, there's going to be a case to be made for it. But you still have all the work to do. First, prove that there is any God and any prophet from any God. You can't just begin by assuming there's a God and a prophet.
Yeah, like it gets like super complex because you need like a bunch of criteria and stuff. And so like, yeah, like I understand, you know, like I wasn't like here to try to convince you guys. Like I'm here like trying to learn from you guys, you know.
I get it. And that's why I'm not beating you up. I'm not trying to beat you up over any of this. I'm just saying that what you've come with so far is not even the hopes of a beginning of being a compelling case for Muhammad being a prophet or the preferred prophet of any God or any God existing. And so I get why you and other people become convinced by some of this stuff, because when you run up against, let's say, a Muslim that knows all of this way better than you do, somebody who's spent their life studying the history and everything else, it's a daunting prospect for you to challenge them and say, hey, hang on, how do you know that? Hey, hang on, how do you know that? And they're probably not going to answer. It can appear to be rude and all this stuff. And so we are conditioned, all of us as human beings, to generally accept whatever people are telling us. You're doing it right now, by the way. You are listening to me and Viced, and we're making sense. And you do not yet understand everything that we've said, but you're grasping enough of it that it makes sense. And now you're going, wow, yeah, these guys are making sense. I applaud you for asking the questions. I want to caution you against going wherever the wind blows or just agreeing with whoever you listen to last. Instead, go out and do the investigation. And if you ever get to a point with any of this where you recognize that you don't understand something and that you probably can't understand something right now, like I have no way of understanding if somebody's right about quantum mechanics. I just don't. And if I spend a long time studying it, I might be able to get there. But if that's the case, like if you don't have a good enough understanding of history, of Muhammad, of Islam, then you should not believe it. It is a mistake to believe something that you don't understand. It is going back to Stevie Wonder and the song Superstition, when you believe in things that you don't understand and you suffer. superstition ain't the way, and religion is superstition on steroids.
Yeah, like honestly, like if I'll be honest, like the thing that like I was kind of like whoa about was when they said, for example, like the hadith, like these sayings of Muhammad that, you know, the Turks will like be dominant over you and they'll take the caliphate, basically. That they said that these things were compiled centuries before the actual event took place. So like that's why I was like,
okay.
oh, man.
And Jews say the same thing about prophecies regarding the Temple Mount and Jerusalem. And Christians say the same thing with regard to prophecies that, or things that they view as prophecies with regard to Jesus being the one true Messiah. People make all kinds of claims about predictions. The thing is, how do you tell which ones are right? And even if you did, this is the easy thing. Say, okay, here's a prediction, and it definitely came true. Now, the next question is, how was that prediction made? Was it lucky? You know, all those questions I asked earlier. But I tell you what, though, Mohammed, call us back sometime, do some more thinking about it, do some more investigating. If you find a better argument or if you find a case for prophecy, by all means, let us know, you know, how it's going, and we'll always do our best to answer it. But I got to move on to some other callers. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
That's rough. And I just, what is your background with religion? Because for whatever reason, that's something you and I don't think have ever discussed.
I was raised in a very liberal Christian church. It was actually the first church in Canada to perform gay weddings. But I kind of self-fundamentalized because as I thought about it, it was kind of like, well, God is the all-powerful God of the universe. If he has a message for us and it's the Bible, then like, why should we be questioning the Bible? So I kind of like, I took my liberal background and self-fundamentalized. And then I ended up in a Christian high school that it was the Brethren in Christ, which is kind of semi-fundamentalist. Like, I don't think they officially have positions on evolution stuff, but a lot of my teachers were anti-evolution. And then I eventually, I kind of, as I started noticing like little detail, like minor details that just didn't quite seem right in the Bible. And then that started me down a path of doubt that had me sit down and actually try and read the Bible. And by the book of Joshua, I was an atheist.
Yeah. I most people who are listening to this are going to know the bulk of my story, which is that I was brought up primarily Southern Baptist, occasionally going to Pentecostal services for good music like Petra and Carmen, but primarily Southern Baptist, fundamentalist. And I went kind of the opposite direction in that I gradually became more liberal. But the thing was, I did it knowing I didn't have a leg to stand on. I did it knowing that I was imposing my own views over what the Bible actually said. As repugnant as, let's say, Westboro Baptist Church is, their views are biblical. Yeah. When the Bible says, you know, hey, you can debate about what's to be taken literally and what's not with regard to maybe the Garden of Eden or the process by people might go through to try to date the earth. But when the Bible says, if man lies with a man as he lies with a woman, they've committed an abomination or deserving of death, that's not hyperbole. It's not a metaphor. I mean, by the way, it's also not an instruction for you to necessarily kill them. I recognize saying they're deserving of death isn't, that's how my gay friendly churches say, well, that's up to God whether or not put us to death, not human beings. Human beings are supposed to forgive. But I saw a comment just the other day was from, I don't want to beat anybody up because there's lots of stuff here, but Christianity is not about forgiveness. Christianity is not about humans forgiving humans. Christianity is about God forgiving humans. God chooses who he's going to forgive. Well, there's the whole process of, or the discipline of exploring soteriology to figure out what's required for salvation, who's going to be saved, etc. But at the end of the day, you can forgive people all day long and go straight to hell under almost every model of Christianity. And similarly, you can go to heaven without ever forgiving anybody. Oddly, I think that from my perspective, as a former Southern Baptist, if you were living a Christ life, like you would be forgiving, but that's not the key behind it. This conversation was about capital punishment. And it was like, how could Christians be in favor of capital punishment? And I'm like, because the Bible is and God is. I mean, it's just there straightforward. But it's so hard and I, I appreciate Mohammed calling and asking the questions. Here's something that you can ask yourself, Mohammed, and everybody else as well who may be struggling with this. If there is a God, why is he letting you struggle so? If there is a God who is the one true ruler of the universe, who wants you to know that he exists, whether he's Yahweh, Allah, whoever, why is he letting you struggle? Why isn't he giving you the information? If you are sincerely seeking God and open to the experience, why aren't you getting the experience? Why aren't any of us? Why is it that all I ever hear about is nothing from a God and everything about a God? I hear men constantly telling me what they think about a God, but there's thousands of denominations just within Christianity, and there's a variety of denominations within Islam and Hinduism, and there's so many different views. Isn't it, if there was a God, wouldn't it be grossly immoral for that God to not clear this up? To let people just sit around and flounder? And worse,
to let people kill each other over which God is the right God?
What if he's actually playing favorites, which is what some of them know? Like, I come only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Oh, I'm not going to reveal myself to you or you or you, but I'll let you know, and I'll let you know, and let you know. That's not the God that most people seem to believe in. For those of you who do believe in it, and you think that you're one of those chosen few, cool, congratulations. You're just exactly as special as you think you are.